concern to anyone. I have a few thank yous to McDonald's locally, or McDonald's restaurants, who donated the coffee and supplies, to Foodland Supermarket in Amherst View, who donated the bottled water and baking ingredients. Then the Frontenac students in the foods class baked the treats and donated those. And I want to thank the school council members too. I stand here as the chair, but there's other people on the committee that have pitched in to make this night come together and work. We also need to note the Ministry of Education Pro-Grant, which is a Parents Reaching Out grant, a program that school councils are allowed to apply to annually for parent events that support student success and well-being, and that has in part funded this evening. So to Dr. Clinton. Many of you probably saw her biography on the website or the web page, and if you didn't, get ready. She has a vast range of professional and personal experience. She is clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster Division of Child Psychiatry. She's on staff at McMaster Children's Hospital working in pediatrics and family medicine, an associate in the Department of Child Psychiatry, University of Toronto, and the Hospital for Sick Children, a senior scientist at the Infant Child Health Lab at McMaster University, and recently became an education advisor to the Premier of Ontario and the Minister of Education. For almost 30 years, Dr. Clinton has been a consultant to children and youth mental health programs, child welfare, and primary care, a founding board member and a fellow of Dr. Fraser Mustard's Council for Early Child Development, a 0 to 3 international fellow, a fellow for the Child Trauma Academy, and last but not least is mom to 5 adult children. Are you tired? Next comes the exam. Can you remember? So on behalf of Frontenac Secondary School and our community, Dr. Clinton, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I was introduced in Winnipeg by a young fellow. A young boy, and he said afterwards, you know, just a bit too many fellas in this introduction. So I have been around. It's interesting, Beth. We were talking in the car on the way here, and I have five great kids. I'm not quite ready to make the transition to having them my adult children yet, even though they're 21 to 31. So I am really delighted to see such a great turnout this evening to hear about the adolescent brain. I'm going to tell you that it is not a contradiction in terms, adolescent and brain, that the two go very well together. I've spoken about the adolescent brain on April 1st, and people have said, oh yes, so I get it, April Fool's, adolescent brain. I'm here to give you a very, very different view than that of the adolescent brain. My key messages are very simple. One, the adolescent brain is not a mini adult brain. It's not an adult under construction, in waiting. It is a brain under construction. So that's number one. Under construction. And if we think of the brain as under construction, and I'm going to show you all about the brain here, then that might give you a little bit more wiggle room in being able to manage some of the challenges that come with the adolescent period of development. The other key message that I'll give you is one, under construction, and two, young people need more of our time, not less of our time. We've got lots of memory about when we were kids, and you know, we would go out and we'd be gone for days on end, and our parents wouldn't give a crapola, and we'd come home and they'd say brush your teeth and brush your boots. You know, we all have these stories about when I was a kid, and of older people saying, well, you know, when I was 16 I took on the Merchant Navy and became a captain at 18. The truth is the world is very, very different now for our adolescents, and that they need more of our time, not less of our time. So I'm going to talk to you about the brain. I'm going to talk to you about the impact of stress on the brain, and throughout I want to weave the concept of positive parenting and how the research evidence is absolutely solid that when you have a positive relationship with your adolescents, when you set firm and fair limits and treat them with respect, things go much better. So they're the key messages. If that's enough for you, you can go and have those great cookies and what have you, or you can hang in and hear some more. So adolescents, why do they do the things that they do? You know, as we as adults look at this picture, we go, oh my God, like who would do that? Anybody in the room would try that, right? So there's always one or two. There's always one or two. But usually by the time we have made it to adulthood, we have learned to set some limits on what we do, right? What is it that's going through his mind? Is he thinking about danger? Not at all. Does he know that it's dangerous? Yes, he surely does. He does. But one of the key differences in adolescence is that the excitement and the thrill of something outweighs the negative. It's a biological thing, they think. We can't really draw absolute direct conclusions. But we do know that the adolescent brain processes information in the emotional realm differently than when they're adults. That they are growing and learning how to deal with the complexity of life. So, we know, somebody asked me if I had, there were a couple of things I was asked as I was walking around, and one is a Twitter. So if any of you tweet, go right ahead and tweet away, or whatever it is that you do. And the other is, it's being videotaped, and also the slides will be available. I don't have any handouts, but I will make sure that there's a copy of the slides available with that, so you don't have to madly take notes. So, how is it now that we know so much about the adolescent brain? Well, we can now look, and when I say we, I should clarify, I am not a neuroscientist. I study neuroscience. That my research has mostly to do with screening in kids who are younger, but I'm a student of neuroscience. And as such, I take wonderful, shiny new knowledge that the scientists come up with, and then figure out ways of making sense in my head, and then bringing it out to people. So I'm a knowledge translator. So what we now know about the brain, we've been able to look, the scientists are able to look inside the brain in ways that weren't possible before. So in the past 10, 15 years, there's been an explosion of knowledge about what's actually going on inside the brain. So I have lots of knowledge from neuroscience, but I also have lots of knowledge from my 5 great kids. So these are them. I don't have a couple of others who aren't so great, that I don't show pictures of, just so you know. And you know, there's this whole new phase I'm going to tell you about called emerging adulthood, where kids are 18 to 25 and they don't feel like they're taking on adult roles. And so I think that part of that is us as adults knowing a whole lot about what's going on in their lives. But I bring you my 5 kids. Now you may say, why is she talking to us? Because I can give you some advice on what to do about certain behaviors that young people might get involved in. My mantra is progress, not perfection. And I've needed that mantra. When one of my sons came home in the back of a police car, drunk out of his mind, handcuffed, I had to come up with some strategies for dealing with that. So you can ask me about them. Whether I did it right or wrong, I don't know. But you might be sitting there now going, well, why should we be listening to her if her frickin' kid was in the back of a cop car? Well, it's just to show you that I'm very real. I'm very real. And that particular child is doing absolutely brilliantly now. He survived and we did barely. So the thing about the adolescent years is they're very complicated. It is a complex time of life for kids. They have to figure out, do they fit in? Who are they going to be like? Who's cool? Who's not cool? Should I try these drugs? You know, should I go to a party when I know there's drugs and alcohol there? And the resounding answer that they come up with is what? Yes, they should. Many kids, like almost 50% of kids from an Ontario drug use survey, we know have tried alcohol, and 25% have tried marijuana. So we know that these are things that ordinary, typical kids are trying and experimenting with. So I'm going to suggest to you that we have to think through the lens of what is our relationship with our kids as they go through these trying times. What is it that we think is the most important lesson that they learn? That we're there for them no matter what, or we come down like a hammer whenever they break the rules? I'm going to suggest to you that the big body of research says that when you build relationships, when you have firm expectations, but that you are democratic in terms of how you manage when they go off course, your kids are going to do far better. They're going to do far better. That is positive parenting. The other reason that I bring my kids along with me is, one, well, I'm a medical doctor, so I have to tell you if I've got any drug company sponsoring me. So I don't. These are my sponsors. But the other thing is, they're so different, the 5 of them. Same dad as of the text that I got on my way to the hotel from the train. So biologically, they've got the same genetic material, yet they are so very, very different. Their temperament is completely different, one to the other. And I know last year, Beth was telling me, you had a session from Greg Lubomir on temperament. And we don't spend nearly enough time talking about the differences between kids. So progress, not perfection, has to be the mantra when you have our first child, Andrew, who's now 30 and 31. And he was a very easy baby, really easy to figure out. So we thought we were fantastic parents, right? Oh yeah, we've got it nailed. Well, 18 months later, along came Kathlina, who was one of the books that we read talking about temperament called Babies Like Her, Mother Killers. Okay, right. I'm going to recommend that book as a child psychiatrist, right? But, and you're going to have, there are kids that are in your mind just now who are more intense. When they feel things, it's big, it's not just nice and quiet. When they're persistent, they go on and frickin' on. Enough already, right? Other kids, you can give them an alternative and they say, okay, well, I'll think about it. But Kathlina, when she came out as a baby, she cried unless she was with me. When she was learning how to walk, she walked a few steps and then she was running. She exploded into language. Everything that she did was more. She was more sensitive to the feel of things. You know, she had to have her little raincoat just so tight. And who knew that socks had lines on them? I didn't know that, or tags. So much more sensitive to the environment. Well, if you don't figure this out, kids come out that way. And when they thrive is when there's a goodness of fit. When we as parents have figured out our kids are spirited, or our kids are slow to warm up, then we're able to help them morph and be what they want to be in the world. But when adolescence comes along, some of those things that you have probably said out of your mouth is, my God, you were like this when you were 5. What's with it? You're 15, right? So what we see in times of transition is kids go back and revert to those old comfortable ways. So, temperament. One of the big temperament differences that not enough people know about is introversion and extroversion, because we can see these magnified in the adolescent years. An introvert is somebody who gets their energy from being quiet. Introvert, downtime, need time to think. An extrovert like me, I get my energy from talking, from being with other people. I think by talking. Introverts think by thinking. Like, how weird is that? So what happens is introverts and extroverts like each other and marry. Right? So my husband is at the extreme end of introversion, I'm at the extreme end of extroversion, and so in the morning I'll have something I really want to talk about, you know? Like, we want to go and visit our daughters out in Vancouver, so that might mean that we have to leave early on a Friday. So what do you think about we're doing that, Jim? Do you think we could do that? Well, silence. Now keep in mind, I make my living by talking. I'm a shrink. Anyway, by the end of the day, I'm exhausted from extroverting, and he's finally got an answer. All right. So, how is this relevant to this? Well, one thing. So introverts, what introverts say about extroverts all the time is what? You never shut up. And what extroverts say about introverts? We never know what you're thinking. You never talk. So it's really important for us as couples to go kind of through this. But in adolescence, these introverted and extroverted characteristics can become more exaggerated, can be seen in a more larger than life. My one son was taking a psychology course on personality. And he comes home, I'm driving him home, and he says, Mum, I'm learning about personality and about temperament, and I'm an extrovert. Oh, yeah, I know that, Joe. Yeah, you sure do. No, you're not. Well, do you know what? Extroverts also like to take risks. Yes, they do. Well, that's why I have all those speeding tickets. So it's really your fault. And I said, well, Jojo, well, no, I didn't say it. What I thought was, well, Jojo, you were an emergency C-section, that's why I'm fat. Anyway, enough. So, we need to understand the way our children are put together. And their temperament plays a huge role in that. But let me tell you a bit more about the brain. We now know more than we ever did. When I was finishing medical school in 1981, we kind of thought that your genes determined things, like how tall you were going to be, how smart you were going to be. It had to do with your parents' genes, and they come together, you know, like for intelligence, you're going to be as smart as your parents are, and then the genes get kind of diluted, and the youngest in the family is the dumbest, you know. Not true. That was a joke. But now we know that it's not your genes that determine who you are or what you're good at. It is in part, but hugely, the influence of the environment we now understand is far greater than it ever was before. That your genes are kind of a blueprint, but it is how the building gets constructed by experience that determines who you are and how you turn out. Huge change happens in the brain in the earliest years. We call the brain being changed by experience or the environment, neuroplasticity. So neuro for neuron, that's what a brain cell is called, and plasticity because it gets molded and changed. So we thought that there wasn't very much neuroplasticity after the couple of years, the first early years. And then science, doing more and more exploration, saw that in fact there's huge neuroplasticity that happens in adolescence, that starts around 10 or 11 years of age, and now we know goes on. A huge amount of change occurs in this 11 to, do you know how long the brain changes go on? 25, 28 years of age. Under construction. Longer in males, sometimes a whole lot longer in some males, on and on and on. But we have to get this concept. This concept is really important, that the brain is built by experience. It's genes and the environment interacting, and it doesn't just happen in the early years. So in adolescence, as the brain is changing, and I'll tell you more about it, the experiences that adolescents are having is what's building and sculpting their brain. So if that's parents who are supportive, who are firm but fair, friends who are engaged in basketball and setting stuff up at the school and involved in things, those experiences are building the brain. If they're in the basement playing Grand Theft Auto, Halo, whatever, that's what's building the brain. So the good news is, adolescence is a brand new, fresh opportunity for creating a new way of being. But the negative side of neuroplasticity is if a child gets involved in drugs and alcohol and skipping school and hanging out with the wrong kind of person for their own well-being, that is also sculpting the brain. So we are our brain, and our brain is a social organ. We are wired, literally wired to connect. So you're going to hear from me throughout this evening that the quality of our relationship with our kids literally sculpts their brain, literally builds their brain. And we know about, and it's easy to have lovely, warm, nurturing relationships when our little ones are small. It's easier. It gets a bit harder once they start to be able to talk back. But it is hugely important to keep in mind that even as our kids are spending more time with their peers, it doesn't mean they love us less. When you are using parts of your brain over and over and over again, you're building highways of connection. And so the kids who have an easier time navigating all of the challenges of adolescence are the kids who have lots of different pathways in their brains connected. They've got skills, positive assets, like connection to significant adults. They have a love of learning and want to learn. They have a future for themselves that they vision. So those kids have had experiences in their lives where their brain cells have connected up to make those pictures in their brain. Is that making sense? And so it's our relationship with them that makes all of the difference of whether they are going to go off course and crash or go off course and then veer back on course. We can never ever say from my 30 years in child psychiatry that it's too late. We can never say that it's too late, because I have seen over and over again the power of one. So what happens deep inside the brain with experience is neurons fire up, and the more they get fired, the stronger the connection. So kids who are connected to a teacher in school, and it's interesting, I was having a conversation, our youngest boy, it was a family event, shall we say, getting him through high school, if you kind of know what I mean, right? It took all of us. He hated school right from the start. I remember when he was about 10 years old, here we are on a trip up in Ottawa, and we go and see a museum, and he says, "I hate learning." Oh my God. You know, we kind of